I loved my time in Southampton. I think it was a very good upbringing in a city that was very culturally diverse. It wasn't stuck in its ways in what I could see. As a mixed-raced guy, to be accepted, it's tended to seem like my black friends would accept me as being black, and my white friends would accept me as being black. It wasn't you're you in its entirety, and it was almost like, so there was moments where it would fall into, if you could run really fast, it's like, oh yes, because you're black genetics, that's kind of that. It's because you're black. It's going to go that route.
Is knowing that I come from, you know, these deep threads of history and culture and heritage, you know, both going back to Benin in Nigeria, fantastic, but also knowing that I've got very strong Cornish and Flemish and French roots as well that go right back to the Middle Ages, and I love all that kind of potpourri of history and culture. And also the DNA is, I think it's a powerful, powerful mix.
Well, my parents, both from Jamaica, but on my father's side is Chinese Jamaican, and on my mother's side is Indian Jamaican. And they meet in the middle and produce me, basically.
My dad is Caucasian white and he's from Southampton, from England. My mum's originally from Belize. And Belize is a bit of a mix between kind of Hispanic culture and Caribbean culture. It used to infuriate me because people couldn't identify where I was coming from. But actually, as I've got older, it's actually a bit more fun because they can't pigeonhole me.
My father's from Grenada. My mother's British. And the most important part of my Caribbean heritage, that will always be part of me, is the music. In a lot of senses, that my father was very much into his music. He was a bass guitarist in a group called Ebony Rockers. My mum being white and having Jewish roots within her father being an Orthodox Jew and her mother being Reformed. So within the Jewish religion, through the bloodline, it would make me Jewish if we're being religious. But within my family, we never really practiced Judaism within my household. I only really understood how far my grandmother had gone to become a Reformed Jew when she passed away, and she wasn't having a Christian or a Catholic or whatever was deemed in my mind that my grandmother was, because I never really saw her as Jewish. She was at the synagogue and she was having to be going through the traditions of a Jewish funeral, and it was a very interesting experience for me.
Well, I think the benefits of having a diverse background is quite simply, you know, the different elements that come into it. You know, the Chinese, the Indian, the Jamaican, the Cuban, all bring different kinds of elements. But I mean, you know, the one guiding factor for me would be the African element. You know, in terms of the rhythms, in terms of the harmonies, the melodies and stuff like that. I think those things come from quite deep within, you know, and they're quite prevalent in what I do. People just want to get together, make love, have fun, man, you know what I mean? And sometimes it's just not about where they're from or what they look like or anything like that. People just get on a basic level. And that's great to see, but that means that people are just taking each other at face value rather than where they're coming from, you know?
I think the benefits of coming from a cultural diverse background, mixed race family, is that I get the best of everything.
Some contrasting views and opinions there from those of mixed heritage. It highlights how that broad term, mixed heritage, can mean a myriad of things to different people. We're privileged to be here at Sea City Museum in Southampton, which celebrates the contribution that migrants have made to the region. It also demonstrates how the cultural composition of the city has changed as a result.
And this is a form of losing your identity. If you lose your identity, that is when you have lost your soul.
In 1992, a small group known as the Black and Asian Video Panel made a film called The Colour of Love. It shone a spotlight on the issue of mixed-race relationships. Just a stone's throw away from here stood the gantry, Southampton's alternative theatre. A lively 2-hour debate electrified the theatre.
Choose to love is the true sign of my emancipation, because within my emancipation I have choice. And the one thing that white people have tried to deny me at all stages and continually, the one way they have kept us oppressed, the one way they have taken away everything we've had, is by denying us choice. Now I choose to be with a white person.
Views on mixed-race relationships were highly polarised at the time. But in the space of 2 decades, have those views changed? To test the question, we brought together a number of people again who were involved in the original debate.
Actually, I don't actually think it's very honest to say that you don't see somebody's colour.
Yeah.
And I also think it's a bit insulting to both black and white to suggest that you don't see the colour, because I think it's crucial. And if you don't, and if you try and say, well, you know, I love you for your person and I don't see your colour, you're either fooling yourself or you're trying to fool everybody else, because it's crucial.
The 2012 report, The Melting Pot Generation, shows that nearly 40% of British-born black Caribbean people are in mixed relationships.
I don't know if it's for status or what it's for, but it's immediately, I've known them to leave their black wives for white women as soon as they're successful. Why?
The UK has one of the fastest growing mixed race populations in the world. The official estimate is almost at 1 million. But for some pundits, that's an underestimation. All in all, it's evidence of a changing social dynamic. From Sea City Museum, we steer the mixed relationship course to Southampton Solent University with Kiki Maurey, the chair of the original debate.
Thank you to Pauline Brandt. Hello, good evening and welcome. Firstly, I would like to thank Southampton Solent University for hosting us here today, and secondly, to thank our studio audience who have come along this evening. As Pauline said, this evening is an update and a reflection on a similar event in 1992. So let's have a look at one point of view from back then, from Jenny Williams, who is now Jenny McVie.
But I know for a fact, I know personally, that there is a lot of cases, and this is men and women, when they go out with the opposite race, they lose their identity. And it is not in a major scale where you can identify with it directly. It is in a scale like, for instance, they want to have their hair straight, they don't like the afro. It's little things like this, and it's things like, oh, I don't like the darker ones, I like the lighter ones. And this is a form of losing your identity. If you lose your identity, that is when you have lost your soul, because at some point in that relationship, it is going to be questioned, and if you have no answers, you're in trouble.
Oh, that was interesting. Really, really complex issues there. But does it hold true today? Let's ask the audience. If people lose their identity through mixed relationships, does it mean that they lose their souls? Who would like to kick off our debate around that?
Yeah, I think I'll have a go at that for you, Kiki. It can often be soul-destroying, and I think that's what a lot of people must have gone through in looking at the question of identity, because that was important to other people as well.
Yeah.
And sometimes you hid it to survive.
Yeah.
It was, how do you make other people feel comfortable? What do you do? And there's always these questions. I mean, the British got this lovely way of saying, what do you do? In other words, where are you in the society? What status? But if you have a colour, then it's, where are you from?
Where are you from? Absolutely.
I mean,
yeah.
I used to ride my bike up here, 1958, believe me or not, up East Park Terrace. It was a red light area in those days. But people used to, not that I rode my bike for that purpose.
Yeah.
I was only 14.
Oh, well, it started early then.
But
stop him somewhere.
But people used to say to me,
yeah,
where are you from? And I'd say North Baddesley. And they say, no,
really,
where are you from? And I'd say Winchester, because that's where I was born.
Yeah.
And it confused them.
Yeah.
And so people hid their identity just to fit in, to make themselves feel comfortable, other people make themselves feel comfortable. it was very difficult sometimes to survive in those days.
Anybody else got any thoughts on this?
There's a certain portrayal of what being black is, being Caribbean, and the history, the true history, the true knowledge isn't taught to our young people. So what are they meant to identify with? And if they do have an identity, it's mixed with you know, a certain portrayal by certain individuals, and that's not a true reflection of what they are. And then therefore they're aspiring, or they think they're a certain way, and that's not what their true identity, like, or history is.
I have 3 children. Their mother is white, not English, but white. She's Welsh. Just to make that clear, you know, just to make that clear. They are fairly fair-skinned, but one of my children have decided that their identity is going to be black. They've chosen to say that they're black. They're fair-skinned, you know, but they've chosen. So I think the society has a major impact on how people see themselves. When one of my children went to university, and first email they got at the university was curry evening for Indians. And it was entirely targeted based on her surname. You know, and so, but she, I won't say which child, but one of the children has definitely decided that their identity is going to be black. Not because they're black, but because the society has sort of imposed that.
Well, it's very important what Jayanti said about his children choosing to be black. Because it raises a question for me that I have a problem with some of these programs where we look at race and sort of mixed race and so on, where we essentialize race. So somehow that you are written as black or white or African and so on. And in fact, I mean, I think scientific developments have said, you know, quite categorically that there's no such thing as race. There's a social category of race, but there's no biological race. So there's actually more in common between us than we realize. So the question of blackness and racial identification is a political and a conscious social construct. I just wanted to say that because it's quite important to this whole discussion about how people identify themselves one way or another, and about how they're kind of influenced by the people around them.
So right, let's now watch another clip from the first show, and here's Jim Baker making a well-argued point.
The great thing that white people have actually given to people here is fear. They've given us fear. They make us question ourselves. But for those of us who are born from mixed relationships and have come out the other side intellectually, and in terms of our own emancipation, we've taken that fear and we've discovered why we're black. We don't assume it. We don't take it for granted. We are black because in here, we are black. I don't need the clothes that tell me I am. I am black because my head and my heart tells me I'm black. Who I choose to love is the true sign of my emancipation, because within my emancipation, I have choice. And the one thing that white people have tried to deny me at all stages and continually, the one way they have kept us oppressed, the one way they have taken away everything we've had, is by denying us choice. Now, I choose to be with a white person. I choose to understand why I'm black. And I choose to challenge anybody that says to me that I need a crutch, I need a ghetto, I need a separatist view that actually says, I will be black. And before, as I see a hand go up, some of us actually walked with Michael X. Some of us actually were there. Some of us perceive it. But the reality is, what he was saying was, understand your value and your strength and your history. I do that.
And Jim's here in the audience with us tonight. Jim, what's your reaction to a slightly younger you?
I guess in one sense, nothing's changed. But one of the things that I didn't say at that first programme, but is relevant, because my granddad arrived here in 1890. I'm third generation mixed race. I ain't lost nothing. I haven't lost my identity. And as Jent knows from his wife, I'm Welsh. That's a solid identity. You know, it's solid. I know who I am, but what I do know from being mixed race in London, in the East End of London, where there were very, very few black people, is there was nobody to talk to. Now that's the debate about mixed race, and Bob knows exactly what I mean. Who do you talk to? Who says to you about your history? School doesn't. Who talks to you about the coming together of an identity? Everybody talks about this is a damage and mixed race this and mixed race that. That's communities not taking responsibility for supporting the children collectively, not just leaving it to their parents. And I think that for me is the bigger problem. I never had a problem with my identity. I am a Londoner, I am Welsh, I am Bajan. I don't identify with Africa. And the reason I don't identify with Africa is I don't know where I come from in Africa. And I'm not an American, so I don't go and, watch a TV program and create an image for myself. I am proud to be Bajan. I am proud to be black. But I'm also proud of my relationship, which still stands. Unlike a lot of other relationships I knew in that time period. So, love doesn't stand there on race. And I think that nobody can tell you what you're going to do. And that was my original point about choice. Mm-hmm. I had the choice of being in that relationship. I've had the choice of walking away from it. I've had the choice of denying my race. And, people in this audience will know we've all experienced plenty of people who have denied their race when you needed them. When I was growing up, the issue was who was running with me if I looked over my shoulder, or who was hiding around the corner going, I don't know him. So, for me, it's a matter of choice. I think you lose the identity if you're not strong enough to have an identity.
So how could we turn that into a question for this audience then, Jim? Both young and kind of, dare I say, old, like us, alike.
I don't speak for yourself. Yeah, look, Peter Pan didn't grow up. I ain't seen a reason. Yeah. I ain't seen a reason any of us have got to. But I mean, I guess the question really is it about mixed race in that sense, or is it about can we as black people and those who are with black people actually live with multiple personalities, multiple histories? Yeah. I trace my family back to slavery. Can we live with that? If we can live with that and look at that and go, then we do well. Then we have an identity.
Thanks, Jim. Any comments to that? Godfrey?
Sorry, can I just quickly ask the last speaker a question? It's not meant to be personal, but one of the criticisms which was leveled at people, particularly of our parents' generation and parents' generation particularly, was the minute you black men sort of get somewhere in life, you go and choose a woman and she has to be white because of some reason or the other. And there are lots of conceptions around why that is the case. Do you think that's an issue, and how do you place that accusation alongside your assertion about the right to choice? Is choice as simple as it seems, or is it contextualized by the social circumstances?
As a man, I can't defend the behaviour of men, and it's got nothing to do with race. Men will go into relationships as quickly and as easily as they can, subject to where they are. That's not about being black or white, And there are plenty of men who are in mixed race relationships for a week. But the reality is, for me, I know my grandfather arrived in Barry in South Wales, and he chose to be with my grandmother. He could just as easily have chosen to get back on the ship, he was a sailor, and go back to Barbados. He never did. He had 5 kids. He never went back to Barbados. It was his choice because of that woman. And I think that's, for me, that's it. It isn't about, one way or another. Some environments of that generation, hey, there were no black women. Let's be clear, in Barry at that time, there were no black women. What am I going to do? I'm going to be celibate? And so, but in other places, when we talk about the Windrush generation and just afterwards, well, there were. So people make a choice. But we've all seen failure, and it's not to do with being black-white relationship. It's to do with the failure of a relationship. I don't think men suddenly go off and choose to be with a white woman because, and I don't, historically, although I would say that's much more likely in the Caribbean than it is here. The status of that is in the Caribbean. The status of that isn't here. There are plenty of people who are in the Caribbean who've gone with high yellow, you know, mixed race light, because that's status. There's no status here.
Can I interject here?
Sorry.
Hang on a sec. I just want to place this in context, because you know the original Colour of Love session did have a quotation from somebody who talked about, you know, black men in Southampton going off with trophy white wives. And it's kind of interesting, it was part of that kind of political stroke social categorisation that was going on, that 21 years ago, in this country certainly, and as Jim says, it may still be true in the Caribbean, you know, with some individuals maybe, you know, white women were seen as slightly higher status than black women, and black women in Southampton, we talked about things like this, that we were perhaps being overlooked, and that there was an issue of perhaps exclusion and preference. So, you know, it may seem a strange conversation to be had, but that was the sign of the times. But I think, in a sense, things are starting to move on. As Omar said, people come together because they're attracted. Hey, they want to have, what did he say? They want to have a good time and basically make love and dance, yeah, regardless of race. Do you see? So you had a point to make.
No one has mentioned love for a person.
Yeah, Jim mentioned love.
Well, that's what it is.
You
fall in love, and you know, there's nothing to do with identity.
Yeah.
You fall in love, and you're with a, you know.
Yeah.
You're with
In
a
your
partner.
case, you fell in love deeply.
38 years ago.
38 years. Hey. And doesn't she look well on it? I can't say the same about him.
Well, she's been well looked after.
He looks a bit tired. Yeah. She's obviously keeping him up to the mark. Pauline, very quick point.
I also pick up on a sort of, there was a sense of elation. We're feeling a bit more free about it. Hey, Barack Obama is still in office. And like we had in the first clip, it's like, I can relax. I'm from Belize. I'm from Cuba. It's become the new black. You talk about all your connections in terms of diversity.
Let's move on. We're next going to hear from Julie Corrett, who argued a crucial point 21 years ago. Let's have a look at what Julie was saying then.
Actually, I don't actually think it's very honest to say that you don't see somebody's colour.
Yeah.
And I also think it's a bit insulting to both black and white to suggest that you don't see the colour, because I think it's crucial if you're in a mixed race relationship, or even if it's not an intimate relationship and it's a white person with black friends and black people with white friends, that you must recognise the person's ethnicity and colour. You've got to understand that issue, and you've got to put it first. And if you don't, and if you try and say, well, you know, I love you for your person and I don't see your colour, you're either fooling yourself or you're trying to fool everybody else, because it's crucial.
Hello, Julie. Well, bring us up to date. Is seeing someone's colour as crucial as it was back then? So I'm going to kind of budge in next to you. Do you mind? You've been keeping my seat warm for me, haven't you? What do you think?
Well, I'm just chuffed I'm a trophy wife.
She's lasted very well for all the polishing she's had.
But I'm not a wife, and I just like, I suppose I'd like to begin by saying that actually I felt like that before I was in a mixed race relationship. So, I mean, this is Johnny come lately, this guy. So, but I think, no, I haven't changed. It might make for better programme if I had, but my attitudes are still exactly the same. I think if you deny what is a central part of a person, then you are effectively still fooling yourself, trying to fool somebody else, trying to somehow suggest that that crucial part of that person is something that you don't somehow connect with, understand, embrace and love as much as all the other bits of them. Well, there's something missing for me. That's me personally.
Absolutely. And I think that's a really, really critical point. And if I'm completely honest with you all now, I think the last, and I shouldn't say this on camera, you'll have to cut this. The last white guy I went out with said to me, oh, but I do love you, Kiki. I just don't see your colour. And I thought, do you know what? I can't be arsed with this. Sorry. I can't be bothered with this. You know, because I want to be seen. I mean, you know, I want to be acknowledged.
You have to recognise each other's colour, because without that you can't understand the problems that each of you are going to encounter over the times that you're together. I mean, it's quite obvious. My wife, before she met me, she's a white middle-class girl. Okay, she grew up in Hull. Her life has been very, very straightforward. Then she meets me, and all of a sudden things around her change. Because people perceive her differently. People react to her differently. They react to our son differently. So if you don't, it's clear. You have to actually understand each other's culture. And she's amazed at some of the things that have happened to me just walking down the street. If I'm not with her, I've had people shout at me from cars. Even now, I get abuse. We must do. We all do. It happens. So you can't deny the fact of how you appear. Within the relationship, yes, you've got to support each other so that when you get those difficult situations, you can discuss them, she can understand them and not take it too personally. Because unfortunately, it's just
you have to kind of vent, you know.
Yeah, you've got to let it go.
Let it go, vent steam, let it go. But I think, you know, that's such an important point, because I think with the sus laws, you know, still with people of black people, people of mixed heritage, you know, being stopped disproportionately high by the police. You know, if you're in a kind of, you know, in a mixed race relationship, how does the partner then support the, you know, person from an ethnic minority actually go through that kind of experience? Anybody got any views on that? How important that is? But it's a good point made though, isn't it? I think being really aware in relationships that actually there is this kind of social dynamic going on around, especially, I have to say, I'm being really frank, the darker your skin is, the more likely you'll have this externalised abuse that you have to deal with. One more point from the very well-kept lady here.
I just want to say that if you're in a loving family context that's a mixed race family, you encounter racism together. You know, my husband's black, but I've had things thrown at me in the streets, I've been insulted, and you know, you learn, it's a journey. These are you can't just ignore these things, they're very terrible things. And you can't just say, oh, it rolls off. You know, it's like water off a duck's back, because it isn't.
And it's a bit like Julie's point, you can't, you know, colour shouldn't be invisible. It's,
well, you change, identity changes. You're on a journey together, and I've got mixed race children, mixed race grandchildren, and a mixed race great-grandchild. So, you know, you are no longer this sort of ethnocentric person, and that is not your identity. And you learn strategies to deal with, to cope with these incidents, and they still happen today, but you're not dealing with it by yourself.
I can see with you, you know, if it doesn't kill you, it makes you stronger. And it looks like you've come through a lot together. And you look like a great couple. Can I just ask you though, do you feel that those sorts of horrible incidents have lessened over the years?
That's a tricky one, because in the last fortnight, my 13-year-old, beloved 13-year-old granddaughter was racially abused in a local playground and insulted really badly and rushed home crying. Now, those things still happen, and it really lurches you out of your comfort zone. And it breaks your heart, actually, because you think, well, you know, these things happen to me.
So you still have to support each other and the family.
And it comes when you least expect it as well.
Yeah, creeps up on you. Thanks very much for your contribution. Let's move on now. Making the point that wider family connections can have a strong bearing on this subject, next we have a clip from Pauline Damani. Let's have a look and see what Pauline was saying 21 years ago.
I mean, I mix a lot of with a lot of families, and I do know that there are a lot of hang-ups about inter-ethnic marriages, and I know families where the Asian girl might want to marry an African man, and the family will actually say, right, we don't want to know you. And that happens also if a girl wants to marry outside into the white community. And I see that amongst the Asian community, there is a great sort of difficulty about letting go of their children and hanging on, you know, to all that. I'm not saying that that's wrong or anything like that, but I see that happening. And relationships, no matter how strong you are, they cannot be successful in isolation. And if you're isolated from your family setups, then it's far more difficult to make them a success. And I think children also become victims in the long run because your marriage itself is not strong enough.
So Parvin, what's changed in the 21 years since? And here she is.
Can
I sit next to you?
Yes, do. I have been pondering about this question, and I still feel that there is a hierarchy of color.
Yeah.
In society, and it actually compartmentalizes you. And I talked about the Asian community there. I mean, there is a wider impact than at that time. 21 years ago, I'd just not been long in Southampton. But what I found is that families are still quite insular. And when I talk to them, they'll just say, well, I'm Asian, my daughter is no way going to marry a black man or anybody. It's very real and it is very alive. I've just, in the last few days since Don John came to talk to me, I've talked to several people. It also depends. I mean, there is a small movement, but not enough movement. And I think children are also changing their views and doing things. Some parents are giving up and saying, but you know, there is another issue that is really, really kind of ages on criminality, is that when girls want to marry black men and becomes an honor issue for the family, then there are some real issues around stalking, around finding contract killers, around, this is a reality, it's documented, but perhaps not documented in quite the same way as this color relationship. So there are issues around that I still exist. And I'm not sure that that trend is changing fast enough in communities. Because I still heard that through a friend of mine, her sister, her daughter wanted to marry a black man, so they didn't invite anybody to the wedding. But I got to know because she wanted to find out whether she should be going to this or not and supporting it. And my views are very open. It's about what people want, what choices they make, and how we support them. And so it's still going on. It isn't as if it isn't going on. And I think amongst certain communities, there are also now more insularity. There are communities of silence, through the demonization in the media of particular groups, for example, Muslims. And I think that insularity also perhaps kind of breeds this kind of fear and the protection for their children. I haven't tested that out, but I would imagine that could be one of the things where you have communities of silence where this also becomes another issue.
Thanks, Parvin. Anybody in the audience got a comment?
I think Parvin is right. I think it is important support from the family, but people in any relationship, whether it is same race or mixed relationship, if they've got to be bloody minded and they've got to be brave, irrespective of what the family might think. They have to work hard to get the family back, because after all, the children have to know their grandchildren. They might have to work hard. I remember a conversation where my nephew, who was going to marry a white girl, and I think Pauline is right. One of the questions I asked is, if his sister decides to have a relationship with a black man, what would his feeling be? And his comment was complete silence. That said a lot. Yes. The hesitation said a lot, because shadism does play a part. But he asked me a question, said, you and Auntie, you're all right, aren't you? 40 years of marriage, we're all right. Would you do it again? I said, I don't intend to marry again. but
well said, because your wife was sat next to you at the time.
but when I got married then, I probably, with hindsight, wouldn't have done that because the challenge was quite great. I would have done it for love, but I wouldn't have. But today, I think I had to say to him, go for it. You will. Some people will accept it. Some people won't accept it. Some members of family would like it. Some members of family won't like it. But that happens in all relationships.
I know when they're looking for a girl, they say, is she white? That's the first question. Is she fair? Yeah. If she's black, Kali, they call her. If she's black, then perhaps we shouldn't be looking there. You know, we need to find a girl who is a bit more fair in skin. And I hear this regularly. So you have a community, an ethnic group that is very much has a hierarchy of shades of colors, particularly directed, and it's genderized, more for women than for the boys. So my question sometimes is, if you can't get beyond that hump and you're living with it every day in your community, then how are you going to accept anybody else who's not?
The colour of your skin is fundamental. You are black, you are white, you are whatever. But something like religion, as Pauline said, is a choice. You're born into a religion. I was born Catholic, but I don't choose to be a practicing Catholic. That's my choice. Therefore, if I wanted to marry someone who was another religion, Jewish, Muslim, like Kerry Davis was saying, then I choose to change my identity. My colour isn't my identity. My colour is me. I was born this way. I can't change it. So it's not about the choice of my colour and the choice of my identity. This is how I've grown up. This is who I am. If I was born in England, raised as a British person with no African background whatsoever, and then went out with a white British man, we'd have the same identity because we had the same values and we brought up with the same things. It's not about, it's about your background, it's about what you're taught by your parents, it's not about colour.
Well, that's interesting, because I kind of think that, you know, some people agree, a lot of people agree, some people disagree. Because I think identity is still about this stuff, what's inside, what's outside, you know, the DNA, the heritage and the history and all of that wonderful stuff, sexuality, whole range of things. Anyway, let's move on. From a different perspective, Judy Harrison certainly gave us food for thought in 1992. Let's hear from Judy again.
We've got 2 children, and I've tried from the young one's only just been born, but the oldest one's almost 4. And I've tried from when he was born to make him fully aware of his Indian culture and take him to the temple and get him to know and respect that he is half Indian. And I'm fully aware of the racist issues that he's going to face. But the thing that I suppose frightens me and makes me sad is that as a mother of a mixed race child, that I know that although he's starting to face racism already at play school and etc. Although I want to help him, I know that it's very difficult to, because I haven't faced that same, as a mother, I haven't faced that same sort of racism, although I have faced it as being part of the family.
So do you feel at the end of the day he's got to face it almost alone?
Well, that's the thing, obviously I want to help him as much as I can, and I'm trying to, but at the end of the day I haven't experienced that same aspect of racism, although I have experienced it by being married to somebody who's Asian, but not the same extent that he is, because he is half Asian.
But you feel as though you understand enough to prepare him as much as possible for what lies ahead?
Yeah, well, I really hope so, yeah, and I'm trying to.
So Judy, your story has moved on 21 years. What are your feelings watching yourself back then? And there she is in the audience. Welcome. Hello.
Well,
doesn't she look good? Yeah.
Oh God.
Yes.
Well, we're still together. Yeah, we've been together for 30 years. And I suppose, really, listening to that, I can't even remember saying that, but I recognise it. I recognise it very much so, but I can't remember having said it. But I would reiterate that all over again, actually. I think I've got 2 sons now, and the one that I spoke about then, the 4-year-old, I suppose what's interesting is actually when you fragment the family apart, you get different reactions of racism. So that child in particular actually started off being very dark-skinned when he was born, and he became, as he got older, he became lighter. And if he's not with my husband, he could actually look European. He wouldn't necessarily look Asian. The younger child definitely looks, I think, Asian. And he has gone through far more racism at school. He's been bullied a lot from when he was quite young. And I suppose, and that's really difficult to actually to be able to help. What I think is really, I think mixed race relationships are very complex. I appreciate and I very much agree with lots of the things that have already been said. But I do think it's not all honky-dory.
No.
I think they're very difficult. And that's not to say that I wouldn't do this all over again. I would. But I think they are very difficult. My husband comes from an Asian Sikh family who are very traditional. And you've got to be, I think you've got to be very, very strong, particularly as a woman, to actually hang on in there and retain your beliefs as well. And I often wonder whether I've got two sons, and luckily I think they're very balanced and they're actually more integrated, I think, with the Asian side of the family. They've got lots of different nationality, different friends of all races, which is great. In terms of the family, they're far more connected to the Asian side than they are to the English side. Now they are boys. You're talking about going into a very traditional Sikh family. So when we go there, you know, they're treated very, very well. I often wonder what it would have been like and what it would have been like for me if I'd had a daughter. Because I think that would have been
gender plays a role there.
It's a huge thing, I think, particularly with Asian families. My nieces, the majority have all had arranged marriages, and they still very much want that. So. And that's their decision, and some of them have worked very well, some of them haven't. But I think it is difficult, and I think I can't remember who it was, but somebody said about the multiple personalities, and I think that was a really good comment, because obviously you've got to respect each other's cultures, and I really feel that my husband and I have very much done that with each other, and that's been really good. But as well, you've almost got to have a level of multiple personalities to actually survive, and that's and for mixed race children, and that's actually really, really kind of difficult. And at some points, I have felt, to be very, very honest, I've almost felt sometimes that where have I gone?
It's time for our last clip. It's been a fantastic evening. Really enjoyed the discussion. And now we come on to Elaine Grant, who sadly can't be with us this evening because she's poorly. But Elaine, I hope you're feeling better. Let's go to Elaine's clip, which I think is one of the best clips from.
I mean, my experience comes from Southampton, man, right?
Southampton man, Southampton Blackman, where are you?
Right? And I mean, like, with the men we got in Southampton, man, that's enough to drive you to any race, man.
I love that. Yeah? You're going to say something? Yeah. I mean, isn't that, well, I was going to say, ain't that the truth, but I can't really, because we've moved on. We've moved on since then. But, you know, there was a feeling back then, you know, Southampton man, and, you know, it was difficult to sort of, you know, for black women and black men to really kind of get together. And that really captured, I think, a moment in time. It's a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful photo, wonderful picture. Who would like to comment? I want a woman to comment first. Get down. What do you think?
I mean, I would like to prove her wrong in this modern day and age, but I came from London, and I've been here for, in April, 10 years, and I'm still single.
Oh, not after tonight, she's not. She's beautiful. Look at that. Oh, woo! Oh, yeah. Oh.
And I do think, I don't know what it is, because when I was in London, to be honest, predominantly it was, especially in the area that I lived in, it was the black, the mixed race man, but it wasn't just any mixed race man. It was the, you know, ghetto kind of mixed race, the man that would accept the stereotypes of the black man. And then when I came here, maybe because I went to a girls' school or something, I don't understand, but I don't know, but when I came here, the men that I would see were those that have just come from, let's say, Africa, the mature men, or there was, for some reason, it was like there was no black men like me.
Yeah, come on.
No, it's just the way she went, oh, but all I've seen is just African men. That there's, like, the way she said it, it's like there's something wrong with African men, sort of thing. Yeah. But yeah, that's it. I've got no.
So you're going to say it for the African men? They're still out there. They're still around, are they?
I mean, it's not my preference, but.
Oh, yeah, that is amazing. Yes.
Different strokes for different folks.
Let's listen to a point here.
But when I met my husband, and fell in love, I didn't look at his color. I looked at the man, and I identified with his values. And it was when we decided that, well, we could take this relationship to the next level, a race came into it, and color came into it. And please understand that prejudice is not necessarily from the white family to the black child or the black child. It works both ways. My father is a mixed race man, and when I told him I was going to marry a white Englishman, he sent me back a letter by post haste under no circumstances are you see, to marry him. But being bloody-minded, I did. And 30 years on, I'm still married to him. But you see, and he's a Southampton man.
My dad's mixed, so he's like, his mum was from England, his dad's Nigerian, my mum's black.
Yeah.
But my dad would still say to me that he thinks I should marry a black man or a Nigerian man. But I don't think it's because of the colour, I think it's because of the culture more.
Culture.
Yeah. Because I think he thinks I'd be able to identify with a Nigerian man more than a white man.
Yeah.
But also, like, with the interracial thing, it's not just about the colour, because if I could marry a Jamaican, I wouldn't know how to cook curry goat,
so
rice
it's
and
also
peas.
about
I'd be lost.
Why would he marry her? That's what I want to know. Why would he marry you? If you can't curry goat in a pot, he's not going to look twice at you. But I think it comes back to your point about, you know, actually talking and drawing out each other's knowledge of your culture and tradition.
Last but not least, I love Elaine, so I'm going to say this to her. When she comes out of hospital, I'm going to take her to the West Indian Club, because we're getting all the attention now that we didn't get all those years back, and the black girls are just like,
Just 2 points, really. In answer to the young lady over there who's she said she was single. Actually, in my experience, strong women tend to frighten blokes off a lot. Especially strong black women. Black men, for some strange reason, tend to be hands-off.
But you're not saying that she should forget being strong.
No, I'm saying you shouldn't
No,
try
sister.
to bring yourself down either.
Yeah, absolutely.
I've been married to my Guyanese wife for 25 years, and she's the best thing that happened to me.
Yeah. Oh, lovely. Lovely. Very quickly from you, and then very quickly from Bob.
I was feeling underrepresented here.
Yeah. How are you feeling now?
I've been sitting here taking it all. You know.
Yeah.
I'm a Londoner, all right.
Oh,
but I moved down. No, I moved down.
Okay.
I moved down 20 years ago.
What's the point?
The point is, I wanted to know what defines Southampton man. I don't understand. I don't get that.
Yeah.
I don't know what it means.
Yeah.
I genuinely don't. So somebody, please define Southampton man. That's what I wanted to know. Some of the black.
Well, Godfrey's saying just after Cro-Magnon man. But Elaine's not here to explain herself. But there was a feeling amongst black women then that actually it was quite kind of difficult to find a black man who would accept a strong black woman on his arm on her own terms. And I think that was what it was about. Bob, last word.
Just quickly, 44 years ago, as a Southampton man down the Royal Pier, I met a very strong black woman. Yes! It was amazing, yes! And we're still together, fantastically. But what I wanted to say, two quick things. One, that something has significantly changed from the 20 years ago. And that was that in 2001, for the first time ever, we had the identity of mixed race in the census. Before, we never had that. So we had to, you know, be something else. And the last thing I want to say, this is about the colour of love, not sex and the outcomes of that. It is about the colour of love and what goes on from that. And just to say, our two daughters, one's married to a Chinese German, and the other one's married to an Australian Greek Italian. And that is diversity, and they did it because of love, not because of race or colour.
And let's leave that as the last word. Absolutely fantastic. Unfortunately, that's all we have time for. I would like to thank our studio audience, Southampton Solent University and the Heritage Lottery Fund for making this programme possible. Thank you and good night.